The relations between the United States and Russia have sunk to the worst level since the Cold War, and for good reason. Russia keeps attacking this country and others, cyber and also military attacks in the countries near them. And so what will constitute a positive result for the United States when President Joe Biden faces off with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Switzerland tomorrow? Well, joining us now to discuss that, Democratic Congressman Bill Keating of Massachusetts. Congressman, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Terry.
Well, you serve on both the Foreign Affairs and the Armed Services Committee, so that's a couple of lenses on this critical relationship here. What would you like to hear from the president coming out of his meeting with President Putin tomorrow?
Well, first of all, it's going to be inescapable, just like the people you had on before, saying who won the summit. I firmly believe that President Biden has won the meeting before it even started. Because what I want to see reinforced at this meeting is the strong alliance we have. We have one thing in the U.S. that the Russians or the Chinese don't have. We have a coalition that's been with us for half a century, particularly our transatlantic coalition. So before this meeting ever started, President Biden set sails for victory because he solidified that relationship. He didn't go to NATO and just talk about the cost of NATO. He talked about the value of NATO. And so we've had trade agreements that are months long, years long, some of them all of a sudden coming together as a result of the work he's done before. So he's going to walk in when Putin most wants a fragmented Europe, a Europe divided from the U.S. allies. Biden has already secured that coming into the meeting.
You know, can I follow up on that and just press you a little bit? Do you really think that the solid relationship between the United States and NATO allies and Europe in general can be repaired with just a visit? If you were the prime minister of a European country, after the American voters and the American Constitution put Donald Trump in the presidency, and he undermined those relationships to the cheers of millions of Americans, could you really count on America after that? Can you unring the Trump bell?
You can. I've had, without exaggeration, over 300 meetings in the last few years with European officials. They still trusted in us, despite what was going on over the last few years. They desperately wanted U.S. to become engaged again and take, not just be a part of them, but take a leadership role. And so even if you look at the polling among European people within the respective countries, we're seeing dramatic changes where the U.S. favorability, which was at 11%, is now over 70%. So yes, that is happening, and it's happening with trust because despite some of the discord of the last few years, these were decades of building this relationship.
Okay, so another issue. Do you think President Biden should negotiate the release of those two American former Marines, Trevor Reed and Paul Whelan? Whelan and Reed's family pleaded for that. Do you think a prisoner swap or something like that would encourage the Kremlin just to target more Americans, as some people have warned?
Well, it's 900 days, I think, tomorrow for Paul Whelan. And Trevor Reed's family obviously is suffering the same way now. And I've been in touch with the family during this period. I've written a letter to Paul Whelan. I've communicated to our State Department and other State Departments since he has 4 citizenships. Paul Whelan is being held unjustly. Trevor Reed is being held unjustly. There's been discussions, informal. I don't know. I wouldn't categorize them as formal discussions about prisoner swaps. But the people that are being discussed right now, when you consider a trade of prisoners, there has to be some equivalency. And frankly, with the names that are being thrown around from the Russian side, there's not that kind of equivalency. Although I hope for the Whelan family, for the Reed family, I desperately hope we can come to some agreement. If that involves some kind of swap of individuals, so be it. But I think it has to be somewhat of an equivocal, not an equivocal, but an equitable kind of swap.
So President Biden and President Putin will be in that room tomorrow, but there is another presence there, really, another adversary in a way aligned with Russia, and that's China. At the NATO summit, Biden and other NATO leaders released a communique labeling China as a challenge to global security, really a turn for NATO in its attitude towards China. A spokesman for China's foreign ministry today responded saying, quote, "The era of one country or a bloc of countries dictating world affairs is over." So how do you see the threat that China poses, especially as Russia tries to align more closely with it? And how do you think the president is handling that in this meeting?
There's no question that China is our greatest threat right now. If you talk to our allies, if you talk to other world leaders, that's clear. There's a balance being struck here in trying to take the Western countries, the pro-democratic countries, and coming together, because we realize that we're in an era of authoritarianism, and at the top of that list is China. Russia's economy's nothing compared to China's. Their threat is nothing compared to China's, although they have nuclear weapons and they're great provocateurs, and they make a lot of difficulty right now in cyber attacks, on issues of human rights. They're a problem, but China is the number one threat. Coming out of this week where the president has been in Europe talking to European leaders, and he'll continue along this course, we're going to band together. We have the coalition I spoke about. China does not have that coalition. I think that's why they, Terry, that's why they gave that statement that they did. Their worst nightmare is a coalition of democratic countries coming together.
Well, to turn to another, one of the deliverables, you might say, out of that NATO summit, out of the EU. NATO, U.S. talks, the president announced a deal with the EU on an issue that I've been reading about for decades, the fight over aircraft subsidies, the U.S. subsidizing Boeing and the European subsidizing Airbus. Part of the reason both sides agreed to suspend tariffs on each other's planes is that they could focus on countering China. So how significant is this step? And do you think the president is doing enough on trade to check China?
I'm glad you brought that up. That was a major success at these meetings. You know what it translates to in the U.S. to have security over the aeronautics industry? It means securing over 1 million U.S. jobs. This is very important to us. But as you mentioned, Terry, it has a bigger role, too, worldwide. As the European economy and the U.S. economy would be about half the world's GDP together. So we have to deal from strength in that regard. And when we can start resolving these trade issues, we're moving strongly along those lines. And we also open the door for technological kind of discussions going forward, making sure that we can begin more earnest discussions about steel and aluminum. And indeed, the U.S. Trade Representative is there and will continue the discussions even as the president is leaving.
One of those issues that might have flown under the radar for people that is quite significant. But now let's talk about the big picture. With President Biden on the world stage, what do you think has been his most significant action or the biggest change in direction we've seen so far from President Biden?
Well, I think it's stability, experience, predictability. It doesn't sound very exciting, but I got to tell you, the European officials that I've talked to, they've been wanting that for the last 4 years, and they're getting it. You know, they always say to me, we have the same concerns you do with Russia, except we're neighbors. They share borders, many of those countries in Europe. They've had the aggressiveness they've seen in Georgia and Ukraine and the threats that have occurred in Eastern Europe. These are real concerns they have. And to have a predictable, stable U.S. is essential. But even more so, I think they're seeing from this trip, and they'll see again with this summit, there'll be leadership coming back from the U.S. We're just not going to be one of the pack. And our allies don't want us to be. They want the U.S. to take that leadership position. And President Biden brings that with him. All his experience. People are asking the question, I think is a foolish one. Is Joe Biden ready for the summit? Well, he's only been preparing for it most of his life.
That's for sure. And he'd be the first to tell you he's been around a long time, and he brings that experience to the table there. Congressman Bill Keating of Massachusetts, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Terry.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.